What's going on, Wolves and Warriors? My name's Jay Stewart, and this is the Better Body Academy podcast, the #1 show for those looking to permanently overhaul their mind and body without dumb diets and unsustainable workout programs. We banish the fitness industry BS and replace it with science-backed strategies proven through countless client transformations. In the Better Body Academy, we help busy men and women around the world get unstuck and back into momentum so they start feeling strong and sexy again. Our mission is to transform 1 million lives, and you, my friend, could be next. And on that note, let's get straight into today's show. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. And we're joined by our new friend, Mr. Bradley Dryburgh. How are you, Brad? You well?
Very well, guys. Thank you so much for having me.
Lovely.
Yes, the last name is very tricky. It's all silence, and it's, it is what it is.
Can you pronounce it for me correctly so I don't mess it up again?
You got to go a bit Aussie bogan with it and just go Dryberg.
Dryberg.
It's basic. Dryberg.
I got it.
Perfect.
We've also got our one of our other Better Body Academy coaches here, Mick. How are you, Mick? You good?
Yeah, I'm really good, dude. How are you?
Love it. Yeah, your biceps are looking very big in that jacket, mate. They're popping out.
Yeah, they're stealthy, mate.
I asked to Brad to come in and have a bit of a chat with us today because so Brad got introduced through us by Mick, and Mick's told us a bit about your story. So he sent us across a podcast, Brad, which was the fourth one. I didn't realize it was over a year ago that you actually recorded it, mate. So fantastic podcast, super vulnerable. You were just mentioning offline there that was like you felt quite emotional as you were doing it, right?
Yeah, very emotional. It's whenever you go back and you recount your story, and especially in a world where I know that my parents and my sister are going to listen to that podcast, and a lot of close family and friends, ultimately they hear you. As someone, I'm quite a strong character. I'd like to think I am. So you never want anyone to worry about you. So in modern life, you charge on and you just keep moving forward. But when you get a little bit vulnerable behind the mic, and they're going to hear that for the first time, well, then it becomes emotional. And to be honest, I actually started and stopped that recording maybe 5 or 6 times and had to restart. What was a bloody 40-minute podcast or an hour podcast took me about 2.5 hours to record because I just wanted it to, you want to make sure that people understand the emotion behind it and what goes into a life with CF and a life, of conquering CF. But ultimately, you want your family to feel like you're going to be okay. And that was a big part of the emotion behind that episode.
Yeah. So was that the first time you'd pretty much put it in the public sphere?
Yeah, look, I've always been really open about my cystic fibrosis with mates and family and friends. And ultimately, I've been quite well throughout the course of my life. Whilst I face challenges, I have been really lucky to enjoy great health with cystic fibrosis. But it was the first time I'd had, I guess, and the first time I'd ever had a public platform too, where I really could promote that message and spread it and share it in depth outside of just a single photo or a single moment on an Instagram or a Facebook platform. So it definitely was. And, the response was amazing and so many people got behind it. And ultimately that's led to the year that was. So
yeah. And so for like anyone that looks at you, you look fit and healthy and good. So do you want to give us a bit of an idea of what cystic fibrosis is actually about?
Yeah. So funnily enough, whilst not a lot of people know what CF is, it is actually the most common genetic illness within children here in Australia. So basically CF is a missing gene that transports salt and water to the cell. Without that gene and salt and water reaching the cells in your body, mucus gets thicker and stickier, and predominantly in the lungs, but also all other organs where it moves through, it tends to sit and stick and scar and impair the function of that organ. So naturally in you guys, you've got that gene and that mucus will move throughout your body quite freely. For me, it tends to sit a lot heavier. Now that means in the lungs, you're prone to lung infection over, multiple times and over long courses of time creates scarring in the lungs and impaired function, as it does in the digestive system and the liver. And basically it affects most organs in the body. So ultimately most people with CF, whilst there's different what we call mutations, and that means different severities.
Mm-hmm.
Mine is what they call the Delta F508 mutation, which is the worst, but also the most common.
Wow.
So
Okay.
for me personally, that means my lungs are affected. So at the moment, and when I say this, I'm like quite at the top of the table as far as CF health goes. My lung function is anywhere between 75 and 80% of normal function.
Mm-hmm.
And most people with CF sit down below 50.
Wow.
And once you hit about 30% of lung function, that's when you become on the transplant list.
Right.
So that's when things start to get really serious.
Mm.
However, that's definitely not in my scope, and I'm doing everything I can to make sure that's not the case.
Mm.
But ultimately, it leads to a few other things as well. So an insufficient pancreas, which means every time I eat food with protein or fat in it, I take digestive enzymes because my body doesn't produce them.
Mm-hmm.
So I take about 50 tablets a day, and I've also got liver disease and have had diabetes because of it too. So it's I guess it becomes a host of things that come off the back of CF, and that is part of what makes it, you know, quite a devastating illness for so many people. And at the moment, to give you an idea of the stats, it looks like, you know, an age expectancy or a life expectancy, I should say, of around 38 to 41 years here in Australia, with 50% of people passing before the age of 27. So those statistics are quite grim. But I say to people all the time, statistics are old news. We're here in the present and we're moving towards the future. So ultimately, whilst there are things that are out of your control, and there's definitely things that have been out of my control, you know, in the last year and will be in the future, but what we can do every day and the healthy habits we create ultimately will give you a better chance of living a long, healthy life with cystic fibrosis as it would with any other condition.
Dude, I listening to your podcast, like one thing that kind of struck me was the power of your parents that you were obviously very close to. So can you take us back to what the doctor basically said to your parents very early on when they obviously have done the test and found out that you've got CF? Basically what the doctor said, and then what the response was from your dad, because I thought that really just shows the difference between someone who operates with a very powerful lens and someone that operates with a disempowered lens and becomes a victim. Can you remember back to your pod?
It's for me one of the, I guess it's almost a defining moment of my life, even though I wasn't present enough to remember it at that young age. But ultimately my parents did not know what CF was, so they were learning on the go. And it was about probably a few months into, I was diagnosed in 3 weeks, and a few months into that, you then see your first specialist. And he sat down in front of my parents and he said, look, unfortunately, cystic fibrosis will ruin Brad's life. And he'd be better off with a genetic illness a terminal illness, because that would kill him or he'd get over it. This will ruin his life. And to hear that as first-time parents and people who are so new to what CF is would be crushing. And, to be honest, I wouldn't blame them if that had maybe taken over their mindset, because you just don't know any better. But ultimately, I'm very lucky that them being the strong characters they are, stood up, walked out of that room, and, amongst a few profanities and many other words, my dad basically said to that bloke, "You'll never see us again, because that's not the mindset we're going to have."
Feel free to tell us exactly what he said, because there's no PG on this one.
So there was definitely a little bit of physicality too, where he grabbed the bloke and said, "Look, you'll never fucking see us again. You're a fucking cunt, and you're never going to have the care of my son, because that's not the outlook that we have. And if that's your outlook, ultimately that's going to define the way that he goes." And I'm so blessed that they said that. And what that then led to was them finding another doctor at Sydney Children's Hospital in Randwick, who was almost like a childhood hero to me, Dr. John Morton. And I remember as a kid vividly walking into his surgery every 8 to 12 weeks. And the first question he asked me was not, "How are you feeling?" It was always, "How many medals have you won this month, my boy?" So, and that was like the mindset that we had. It was a badge of honor that I had CF and I was able to conquer, those challenges every day and every week. So I guess mindset is so important, whether that's you or the people you have around you. And as you would in life, you control your circle and your circle of influence. Ultimately, we control the circle of influence that led to me experiencing the positive health and great moments in my life that I have now.
Dude, like I put myself in the position of your parents, and obviously you're experiencing it as the child in that circumstance. And I recently, so when was it? 10 months ago, close enough, had our first baby, and we had to have a bunch of genetic stuff tested as well because she come out very, very sick. We were in the NICU for about 2 weeks with her. And it was just like, oh man, getting a battery of tests done, and each time feeling like you were like rolling the dice as to what are they going to tell us. And, I really do think that perspective is, and context and being emotionally mature, like really helps. The other thing I want to mention is one of my favorite clients that we've ever had. His name is Neil. Similar situation with a young son, which we can talk about offline or after this, where he was in a very similar position and had to deal with this as a father. And as a father, you just want to be this like rock. Like you just want to be this rock. And you continue to like, you be that rock, but to feel anything is like able to hurt, you can't put a kind of a wrap around your kids is a really difficult situation to be in as a dad. Yeah. You going to say something there,
definitely.
Mick?
No, man. I think I touched on it before. I grew up with 2 close mates of mine that had cystic fibrosis as well, and their parents were phenomenal human beings. Like these guys are they had no limits. They did everything that they wanted to do physically. They did, they just tried. Their parents just pushed them to be the absolute best they could, and it's, I think that's amazing that Brad's got that, because a lot of people give up pretty quickly when they're faced with adversity. So it's this really hits me hard, because like I lost them. I think it was about 5 or 6 years ago, and I was very close to them too, and they were very fit, human beings. I think Jake was like 40 when he passed away, so he did pretty good in terms of the life expectancy. So but yeah, I was there every day at their house, and watched what their parents did for them, and their physio that came over and knocked the phlegm out of his lungs, and I'd jump on the table and help out, and it's it's getting pretty deep and emotional for me too, because seeing having that parent or those parents that could just not see it as a disability, we'll use that word or whatever, but it's his circle of influence is mad.
It's a really good point what you said there, Mick. Like, it's not just the mental fortitude of the parents, but ultimately with CF there is a lot of physical work that needs to be done. And when you're a kid, there's a lot of hands-on physio, which ultimately looks like just pounding on the lungs for hours a day. And my parents, a lot of parents don't do that, and there are a lot of parents that ultimately go, oh, we'll wait until something's wrong, or we'll wait until they're sick, or we'll wait until the doctors really push us to do that. But as your mate's parents were, and as mine were, it was this, let's do everything we can mindset to prevent the worst that could happen. And ultimately it led to a very, very healthy childhood.
Yeah, because like they even went and bought that special bed that had the spring in it, so when they hit him and stuff, like, and we used to take it to soccer, and before the games, like, I'd be on the top of Jakey, just smashing him, getting him ready so he could get on the field. But like, that was, to me, I loved him dearly, and he was a good mate of mine, but it was like, I did it because that's what had to be done for him to play soccer, and he was a fucking mad soccer player. So it was like, well, let's do it. Yep, let's get involved. So Brad runs a fantastic podcast. I think about a year now it's been going.
Yeah, about 14, 15 months, which is crazy. Looking back,
Cool.
It's gone extremely quick. Now, 82 episodes into the journey and in a bit of a quiet month with a rebrand coming. And
Nice.
I've actually got 85 films. So I'm about to drop something a little bit more exciting and dive into a little bit more of a niche.
Nice.
Just, after doing something for a while, as you guys have done here, you find your people and you find the people that really need, I guess, that help and that community around them. And ultimately I found that after 14, 15 months. So
Oh, it's the best. We've got our boys. My gosh, we've got our boys. And this mastermind's been super powerful. But if you, we'll get Brad to give us the name of his podcast kind of towards the end, so you can go and check it out and subscribe it. But episode 4, you've told your story. So let's let anyone that wants to hear that in more detail go over the story. I want to ask you some unprompted questions. And I haven't given Brad these questions beforehand. So give the big dog a minute to kind of think about it if he needs to. But how do you, like, at 23 years old, how do you personally define health? Like, what does that word mean to you?
for me, health is a blessing, right? So, I've had times in my life where my health hasn't been as good as I'd like it to. I've had times where it hasn't been as good as it was in the past, and definitely not as good as it was in the present. And ultimately, for me, health is a blessing. It's the ability to utilize your body to be physically in pursuit of something, right? And whatever that is really dependent on who you are as a person. And I've been on many health journeys because I was, really, I guess I was lucky to be athletically gifted as a child, but I love sport dearly. I'm not as athletically gifted these days, but I love the pursuit of something. And for me, health is that wholehearted approach of being able to move your body, to move it without pain, to basically enjoy the beauty and the gift that life is. And without your health, you have nothing. It is everything we have. It is, I've been in careers where money was my driving factor and my health declined. And pretty quickly you learn that money will never give you the same feeling that being healthy and happy will. And ultimately it is the provider of everything, because without it, you have nothing in life.
You've quoted everything is important until you don't have your health. And then you realize the only thing that was ever important at all was your health.
It's a great quote. It's a Jay Shetty quote. I actually stole it from him. He's a very smart mind himself. But it is, for me, what I've experienced at many stages of my life. And it ultimately that quote there and that feeling is what led to me leaving my job in real estate. So
I'm super interested, obviously, as a coach. I'm interested in your perspective on this. So you make the statement about everything is about your health. Until you don't have your health, you don't have anything. But if I'm right, you were also a qualified PT. Is that correct?
I was back in the day, mate. I was a little 17, 18-year-old whippersnapper running around the gym, training people.
Yeah.
As I said, like growing up, I had a really athletic background. I sprinted quite competitively as a kid over 100, 200 meters. Get me over 250 and I was gone. I wouldn't make it. But loved my footy. I had to quit footy pretty early on because of my liver disease. It became quite a risk of rupturing my liver or my spleen. But I've loved sport my whole life and I'm a real sport fanatic. So that felt like the most natural move for me to escape the schooling system, which I didn't really enjoy.
Yeah.
And, I had a lot of really fun years training clients and helping people discover the importance and the love of health. But ultimately, it just wasn't meant to be my career. Sure. So I moved away and took on some other endeavors in real estate. But I really enjoyed my time as a PT. It's a fun life.
It is. It's fun. It's frustrating.
It is.
And so what I'm interested in is, given that you obviously have been on both sides of the fence, both as a person who is encouraging better health, and then obviously been with the CF part of your life, how do you think, like, I'm super interested. It's like the bane of my kind of, like, it just goes around in my brain constantly. How do you get someone who just, they're naive to what is in store for them? Now, I'm 38, but how do you take someone that's naive to what's in store for them and try to bring them some level of awareness that this is going to catch you at some point if you're not making a start on it as early as possible. And you know, I have this kind of feeling that maybe the answer might be, well, Jace, that's not your purpose. Your purpose isn't to convince people to start, it's to help the people when they start. And that's a fair point. But I can't help thinking that, you know, prevention of ill health is much better than cure of ill health. So do you have a feeling on that? Do you have a thinking
mate,
on?
I'm 100% with you there. Prevention is so important, and ultimately that's what's led to me being as healthy as I am now and being so in control of my health. It was a question that really hit me last year, and I'm glad you asked it, because it's a question that come to the front of my mind. Where last year I was sat in hospital in the emergency department with bleeding lungs, and sat next to my dad at like 2 a.m. in the morning, and we're having a conversation. And I was never a long distance runner. Like I said, anything over 200 meters was not my forte. But sitting there with my dad, and I just started for the 3 weeks before that running 5Ks once a week. And I said to Dad, I said, you know what, like I feel blessed that my mindset is so strong that I'll walk out of hospital here tomorrow morning and my whole focus will be to get back to better than what I was, not just to what I was, but to better than what I was. And I said, but I only wish every kid who come across these little roadblocks and hurdles, or even every adult with CF, understood that same mindset. And I said, I feel like now it's my opportunity not just to recover for myself, but to do something in this recovery process that shows other people how important just that is. That element of prevention, as opposed to waiting for something bad to happen and then having to work out of this hole. Because that is what allowed me to be, and it's actually what's allowed me to bounce back so well from the little challenges, is because my whole life has been a push to be as fit as possible, because I know even in the bad times it will serve me well. And I wanted to do something that was of major scale, because like you said, that question, how do I make people aware of that, is really hard, where we live in a world where we have so much contact, yet emotionally, with so much going on in social media and the world, you have to almost capture people's emotion for them to understand the importance of that. And so I was like, I'm going to run a marathon by the end of the year. So it was mid-July at the time. And I said, got about 5 months just shy of before the end of the year. I'm going to run a marathon, and I've never run more than 5Ks in my life. And I'll prove that, you know, even with bleeding lungs, you can begin, and ultimately that journey gets easier as it goes. But it leads to a place where you foolproof yourself from so many things, and you allow yourself to bounce back better whenever things go wrong. And that was the big story of my last year. I created an event called 42 for CF, which was about not only raising money for Cystic Fibrosis Australia, and we're lucky we got a really good job of that, but to really prove to kids that the importance of your health and the importance of looking after your body and respecting it, and understanding the blessing that being able to go out and run is, or being able to jump in the water or jump on a bike or lift weights in the gym. It is such a blessing that not everyone in the world has all the time. And cherish that, love it. And once you do start, you fall in love with fitness, as I'm sure everyone in this group knows. So it becomes quite addictive, and it becomes something that is just a paramount part of your day, your life, and everything you do moving forward. So ultimately that event started to reach a lot of people here within Australia. And for me, the greatest thing was seeing it's not only education for the people in it, but it's education for, like you said, those parents who are, you know, they're the guidance and they're the teachers of their children. And, you know, to see, we done a news story a month out from my event, and like I had, you know, that news story went up on Facebook, and there were a lot of parents who commented on that. And there was one in particular that wrote, I've got a kid who's 9 and a child who's 7 with CF. And she said, this makes me feel like I can plan for the future. Yes. And for me, that's what this was about. It was about showing people, allowing people to see that there is an answer to this. And whilst it's not always in your control, when it is, do what you can.
Dude, Wow, what an answer. And one of our guys watching live has just commented, holy fuck, this kid is huge. Guys, I just want you to pause if you're watching or thinking about this. Brad's 23.
25 now. I'm getting a bit older.
My apologies. I was paying attention to your podcast age.
Yeah. I don't share it too much anymore, mate, because I'm over the hump now. It's all downhill, hey?
Yeah, it's really playing out in your baby face as well, brother. You're looking like, you're getting old. Hey, listen,
sorry, Jace, one sec. Like, boys, you got to see the video when he runs over the line and at the end of his marathon, and the raw emotion and the tribute you paid to your family. Like, I was bawling my eyes out. Like, I know you were too, but
yeah,
it's just it's so beautiful. To face that adversity with a shield and a sword and go out swinging, like, it's, it brings tears to my eyes now just thinking about it. But you got to get on his social media and have a look, like, just for that moment. Like, it shows how much love and support you did have from your parents, and like that you put all that for them. That was for them, to show them that what you've done for me is right here. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah,
it's the power of
it was a great moment.
So certainly that environmental exposure. So what I might come back to is, I love this kind of question that you asked yourself in your pod. Do you wish you didn't have CF? And you said no. The answer is no. I don't wish. I'm glad that I have it. Do you want to talk us through that? Because I thought that that's a perspective that most people would be like, what?
Yeah. It's life's funny, isn't it? Ultimately, the way that I describe life is it's quite like a game of poker. And if anyone here has ever played a game of Texas Hold'em poker in their life, you get given two cards and you don't necessarily get what you ask for. It comes from a deck, it's shuffled. Some people on the table are very lucky in those first two cards, some aren't. And ultimately, if you look at mine from an outsider perspective, you may go, well, the two cards that you were dealt weren't that lucky. However, they place down the first three cards on the table, and maybe still things don't match up, and you start to get a little bit questioned and challenged, and you think about folding. But ultimately, you just keep charging forward and you keep pushing your chips in the middle, and they put that fourth card down. And all of a sudden, sometimes you just have to wait until the river, that last card, and they put it down on the table and all your chips are in. And then you realize that, hold on, I'm on a winner here. And ultimately, that's what life is like sometimes when you've got a chronic illness or you're facing some form of challenge, where if you just hold on until the river, or you hold on until life presents you that opportunity to get a little bit better or to come out a little bit stronger on the other side, you're often quite grateful for it. And for me, I look at CF as being like my biggest blessing and greatest teacher outside of my family, of course, because it has taught me so much about life at 25 that, when you speak to somebody, if you spoke to many people in their older years and you said, I want to show you a 25-year-old guy with a level of life wisdom, they would go, you can't really have that much life wisdom in your 20s, right? That takes experience, it takes years. But I feel like, and if I can say so without sounding righteously myself, is when you face challenges and you face the prospect that maybe life won't be as long as you hoped it would, or maybe the challenges will come along the way, and maybe everything you work for can be stripped away at one point in time, it gives you a level of wisdom and understanding of what life is really about. And I feel really blessed to have that at 25. I feel it fuels what I do, and ultimately has led to me making the decisions I make and moving in the direction I do. And ultimately it's given me a voice to share a story that maybe someone else may not have been strong enough to share. And for me, I feel like I've been given a gift to really have some impact in the world. And I said from, the moment I was a kid, I used to say to my parents all the time that I wanted to change the world, and I didn't know what that looked like as a kid. But ultimately, I feel a little bit clearer about what that looks like now. And that has been an evolution of my life. And it's the reason I make the decisions I make. And, I just feel really blessed, man, that I get to be a voice for people who don't always have one, or don't have the courage to have one at this stage or this point in their life, but ultimately eventually will. And yeah, it's just, that's for me, I think I am the person I am because of it. I have the close, and I'm sure I would regardless, but I have the close and just incredible bond with my family and my friends and the people around me, because I appreciate how dear and how fragile life is. And, even just the other day, I was on Anzac Day here in Australia, and I was sitting there and just found out some news that an old PT client of me, we spoke about my PT days, an old client, he used to train a hubby and wife. He'd lost his life after 3.5 month battle, with bile duct cancer. Just after, for years and years, they worked to finally begin a family. And I just think, life can rip everything you have away from you at any moment. So we have to appreciate how fragile it is, but the beauty in that too, without an end, it would have no meaning. And I feel like my meaning is to be here and hopefully have some really positive impact and do something special for most people who feel like they need it in their life, because ultimately we all do at times.
Dude, that's like being in that zone of where you feel like you're living your purpose is hard to explain when you're not in it yet.
Yeah.
And it's just like, it's a beautiful feeling. Hey, listen, in our mastermind program, we've been talking a lot about identity. So what's the identity that we hold about ourselves, and how does that influence our the way we view the world and how we go about our life? So I'm interested in what you think your identity is, because in your pod you mentioned that you don't like to refer to CF sufferers, or that's an identity. What do you see your identity as, and how important is it in the way it shapes your life?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I like that. It's funny because a mate of mine actually brought this up the other day. So I've got a little crew that most mornings at sunrise we head down to the beach. We have a run, a swim, a coffee, and we sit around. We have a
peanut butter and eggs on toast, boys.
Peanut butter and toast, eggs on toast.
OG.
It's the morning
OG.
go-to.
OG.
And it's funny. We sit there and we have a conversation. We usually share a few gratefuls, but one thing we started to share lately is something that we're proud of within ourselves. And I guess that comes back down to identity, right? Like a characteristic that we're proud of. And ultimately for me, I guess if I look at my identity as a whole, the thing that probably stands out and pops to the front of my mind is just to be a storyteller. And I feel like that for me is the power in that identity, is the ability to show people through my message, my story, but the story of other people, or the good that exists in life and in this world. And for me, that's a big part of what I believe my purpose is too. And I think purpose is ever evolving, and it's actually a lot harder than people sometimes give it credit to figure out.
100%.
It is really such a complex conversation. And for me, it took, I guess, figuring that out really took scaling it back. And there's a fella that I really enjoy listening to. His name's Ben Crow, and he's credited for some of the biggest mindsets in sport. He actually worked with guys like Kobe Bryant, Andre Agassi, Kathy Freeman, the Richmond Tigers. He's an incredible human being. And Ben Crow says that purpose is something that you're in pursuit of but never necessarily reach. And goals are something that are measured by time and have certain measures. And goals ultimately should lead towards trying to achieve that purpose. So for me, breaking that down, and I think for a long time, what I thought my purpose or my identity were actually just goals. But then understanding that concept and stripping it back has allowed me to really unveil who I want to be and who I see myself as. And I think in a world where there are so many expectations and labels pushed on us by society, it almost sometimes crushes that identity, and you form the identity of what you think the world wants you to be. But there's a really freeing feeling in figuring out who that is for yourself. And I feel blessed to have that. So yeah, I'd say, to answer your question in a very long form, I'd say just a storyteller.
Dude, I love that. I was listening to Tony Robbins through the week talk about the difference between the science of achievement and the art of fulfillment, and how people get them confused. So they have, on a surface level, a number of achievements and, medals, as you might put them, yet they're unfulfilled. I'm just loving all your quotes from your pod. You can be the richest person in the graveyard, but you don't get to take the money with you. So you can be successful, but some of the most successful people in the world are just like, they're just completely unfulfilled and completely unhappy. Like sit on that for a bit. Like, you know, I just, my kind of vision of the world and the purpose of our academy is to impact 1 million lives. And it's because a lot of the things that we suffer from, if you can have this perspective on a genetic condition, a lot of the stuff that we suffer from is lifestyle conditions that are completely preventable. And actually, if you put all the bullshit fitness industry on the back burner and you bring forth conditions like, for example, type 2 diabetes, you know, overweight and obesity, a lot of arthritic conditions, these conditions can be treated by just living a better lifestyle. That doesn't mean going on diets and doesn't mean, you know, training 17 times a week. It's just learning to live a little bit freer.
Yeah.
I think that kind of perspective around fulfillment versus achievement probably is something that we should think a little bit more about. Do you think that people can be held hostage by their identity?
Definitely. And, you know, I guess something for me, you know, leaving my career. So I was in real estate, right, for 3.5 years. And I started real estate as a 19, 20-year-old and finished up at around 23. And it's funny because, you know, especially during that stage of your life, was a quite formative time for me. I was, you know, kind of floated out of PT and I wanted to find a career. And ultimately I found a career at the time that consumes a lot of your life. You spend 6 or 7 days a week doing it. I spent 7 days a week doing it in Melbourne. That's why I ended up back here. And, you know, you become quite consumed by it to the point where, as I'm sure Mick knows, in this property industry, you walk outside of your office on a Friday afternoon, you go for a drink and a bit of dinner. And the first question that you get asked is, how's the market? How's real estate? What's selling? What's happening? You know, how's business? And I got to a point where at the end of my career, it felt like people forgot I was Brad the human being anymore. Like it was
transactional.
Always, how's the
almost.
market? Exactly. It became almost like everybody was a client or a customer. And my identity started to be almost pushed and forced into this Brad the real estate agent. So when I was considering leaving and walking away, I asked myself the question, and it was this moment of like little self-doubt that didn't last too long, but it sort of hit me like, once I leave real estate, who am I? What do people ask me? When I walk into a restaurant and I go to sit down and have dinner, if someone can't come up and ask me about the market, what do they ask me about? But ultimately then, as you boil that down and you sit with yourself and you think about it and you allow yourself to deconstruct why you're feeling that way, it's just because that's been your surrounding. It's not because of who you are or that you can't achieve something outside of that, or you're not bigger than the job you're in or the role you're in. It's just because that is your surrounding so often. And it's like we talk about with, you know, the people you surround yourself with. You've got a great community here. I'm blessed to have a great community of friends. But if you didn't, there's that age-old quote that like the 5 people that you spend most of your time with, whatever they're like, you'll ultimately be the 6th. And it's the same thing with your career and your surroundings, where if you surround yourself with that energy all the time, you ultimately become that. So I think sometimes it's really nice to be able to strip back and step away from that identity when you do feel trapped and really figure out who you are. And I guess it's why you see people take those long extended, you know, breaks and holidays and they go away. And it's why someone like a Matthew McConaughey goes away into the bush to write a book like Green Lights, to ultimately get away from everything that's trapping him and really figure out what that identity is and what that story is that needs to be told. So, you know, I think definitely you can be, but ultimately once you feel free of it and you allow it to become what it truly is, it's the best feeling in the world.
That's just hit me really hard, mate, like extremely hard, because I'm in a position now where I want to do coaching full time, and I have this Yeah, you're a product of your surroundings. So I have a father-in-law who's quite a powerful property developer, and I was becoming him, and it's not me. And like he's an extremely generous human being, and he's very good at what he does, and he's very well respected, but he's very aggressive and very angry, and that's just who he is, right? The age-old saying, that's just who he is. But we clashed not long ago because I'm not that, and I was becoming that, but I stopped. And when I sort of realized what I wanted to do, and found my place in the world, which is touching humans. I know that for a fact. I mean, ask any one of these boys and anyone in the academy of the joy I give them by just lending them an ear. When I found that, and I found that I was more calm and placid, and I didn't put up with negative bullshit. We've clashed so much in the last 6 months because I've found my identity.
Because you're in alignment, Mick. You're in
Yeah.
alignment. The person that you are is aligning what you're doing in your actions.
Yeah.
And I think this is where a lot of people struggle. Particularly, like say on a health journey, they're an unhealthy person trying to do healthy person things. That's never gonna last, ever. It's the reason why people relapse back and put the weight back on, because they don't change the mindset. And you know what? That takes time. That takes a lot of time.
Yeah, exactly. But like what Brad's saying is, like, I always get referred to as, you're the son-in-law of Joe. You're the son-in-law of Joe. Oh, you're going to be like him. You're taking over the company. You're going to be this rich developer. No, I'm Michael. I'm Michael Elias, and I'm always going to be Michael Elias. And I love the guy to death, and he's done so much for me. But I'm not him. I'm never going to be him. And ask me about how I am, not how he's going. I've always lived in the shadow, and I don't want to be there. So yeah, that's hit me hard. So
let's move towards sort of wrapping this one up. So you mentioned that when you moved back from Melbourne, you wanted to surround yourself with good people, the right people again. What does a good person look like to you without judgment, right? Without judgment, what does the right person for you to be around look like?
For me, the right person to be around is someone that ultimately supports you in being yourself. But more importantly, is just like, I'm so blessed, mate. I say it all the time. Like, I'm 25. So in my world and in my age group, I don't drink because I've got liver disease, but there's nothing wrong with having a drink. But ultimately, when you're in your 20s, there is this culture that is go out, get pissed, wake up, feel shit, complain about it for the rest of the day, and just go on, and everything's a bit of a complaint mindset. But and in real estate, there's almost and there's so many amazing people in real estate. I still love so many of the people that I used to work with and work for, but ultimately it's just this rushed mindset. There's no real focus on how well you feel, the things you're doing outside of work, who you are as an individual, the journey you're on. Where I'm in a beautiful position now where my close circle of family and friends are incredibly supportive of what I do. They love me for who I am. They encourage me in everything I do. There's never any doubt. It's always, there's always going to be concern because people want the best for you. But there's always encouragement. And ultimately, I've got a group of lads who I run with who have been a massive part of the change in my life over the course of the last year with my fitness. We're called the Active Boys Run Club. And it was basically two guys who wanted to escape that lifestyle. They wanted to get off the piss on a Saturday night, so they started running at 6 a.m. on a Sunday morning, which is a great way to do that.
Yeah.
And basically, they've started this group that's now about 50 of us, and it's not just boys anymore, it's guys and girls and people from all walks of life and all age groups. They get together on a Sunday, a Wednesday, and a Friday morning at 6 a.m. to run. And for me, I sit back and I look at that and I think, and plenty of times I've had a mate in particular who's a mate of mine, but I've met him down the beach on Sunday morning at 6:30 a.m. just as we've finished our run. He's finished his night out on the piss and he's come to watch sunrise. And I think about that contrast, and I think, how lucky am I to have these people around me that those positive traits and those positive influences ultimately have led to me being out here early in the morning, pursuing my health, having meaningful conversation, being more motivated than ever after a chat or after a catch up or a session where we talk about what we're all doing and what we're trying to achieve in life, that I'm more motivated than ever to go jump in the studio and share a story and build my brand and take this to the next level. I think, the people that you have around you are so important. And sometimes you don't always appreciate that until you've got not good ones, but really positive ones. And yeah, I'm lucky. I'm just surrounded by so many positive people. And every time I do anything where I come out of my shell and I get a little bit vulnerable, or I challenge myself with a marathon last year, that is really proven by the amount of incredible support and feedback and messages and just loving people I have around me. So I feel really grateful, mate. Not many people can say that. So I feel rich.
Wow. It's amazing. Richness defined in non-dollar terms.
Yeah, that's
100%. The way it should be.
Yeah. Last question before we sort of go to where the guys can find you. For someone that's kind of maybe listening and just like in a bit of a funk, I always just sort of say that it's like a feeling of being stuck and they're out of momentum. Do you have like words that you would say to suggest a way to get back into momentum?
Yeah. There's two things I guess I'd say. And I don't know if anyone here follows me on Instagram. I know Mike does, but I've got this trend where I like to put people on the spot for words of wisdom in the morning.
I love it. The poor barista gets smashed.
Yeah, there's a young lad that makes my coffee every morning, Jonah, and I put him on the spot. He's a good mate of mine. But there's two things I want to touch on. So we spoke about purpose before and understanding the power of purpose. Mm-hmm. One thing that I understood last year is, I'll give you a quick, I'll try to answer this and not go too long and too deep, but ultimately I spoke about me deciding to do that marathon after only running 5Ks for 3 weeks before that. Now, for me, those 3 5Ks were the hardest things I've done in my life. They felt incredibly painful. They felt terrible. And ultimately, when I set intention to run this marathon, and it was for more than just the sake of running one, it was for something that really felt purpose driven. It was about being a storyteller and sharing a message that I held really close to my heart. I remember setting out on the first week of training, 7K long run, the week later, the same. Then it was 10, then it was 15, 15, 20, 25, 30. And I sat back 6 weeks time and I looked back and I thought, I couldn't even run 5Ks twice a week, only 6 weeks ago. What's changed? And yeah, there was the science, as we spoke about before, of a smart training program, but ultimately science doesn't help you that much in 6 weeks. But let me tell you, purpose fuels progress. And when you understand truly what your purpose is and what you're trying to achieve, and you have, you're not always going to have meaning and an incredible meaning. You don't always.
All right, just 2 secs, Brad. Sound.
You understand.
There we go.
A little. Sorry, guys, I lost you for a second there. You're not always going to have meaning behind why you do a triathlon or a marathon, or why you challenge yourself physically to change. But ultimately, if you understand what you're trying to achieve as a human being as a whole, and that's one of those vehicles or one of those ways to get there, then the progress you have is out of sight, and it's an incredible feeling. And the second thing I'd say is, there's a guy who I really love listening to. He's actually one of the 50 richest people in America under 50. He's a very smart business guy, Ed Milet, but he's got a very good mindset. And I actually really enjoy his stuff, more so not for the business, but for the mindset. And there's something that he said in one of his podcasts with Jay Shetty where they spoke about fulfilling potential. And we spoke about fulfillment here before. And he said the way that he sees it is that whatever you believe, he said, I believe in God, and I believe at the end of my life, I'll go to heaven. And he said, and God presents me with the best version of myself. And if I'm not that guy's twin brother, well, fuck, I've done something wrong. And I think about that every day, because ultimately I would hate to sit there and there's one of two ways that you die in this world: freak accident. The other is that usually because of ill health or old age, you know that your time's coming. And when that time is coming and that is your end of life, you have a lot of time to sit and to think and to dwell on the life that you lived, or to be very excited by it. And man, I would hate to sit there and think I just lived a life that was so far less than my potential, or, you know, I just didn't reach what I fully could have reached if I really set my mind to it and had a crack. And ultimately, as you sit and you think about that more and more, and you have more of these situations that physically and mentally test you, you start to learn that ultimately, whilst there's so many things that society, you know, hands you down as expectations and jobs and, you know, what you're supposed to look like, what you're supposed to think like, the life you're supposed to live, ultimately it's you and it's just you, and you're in your world. And, you know, when you feel like you're lacking that motivation or you need that momentum, I would just think of that. I'll think of, you know, when you're sitting there and you're 85 and your kids are ready for you to kick the bucket so they get their will money. Exactly what life have you, you know, like, and what story do you want to be told? Because ultimately you're the author of your own story. You just got to pick up the pen and start writing. So
That's it.
God, sit on that for a moment. Oh. Hey mate, I want to thank you for coming in. Dude, you're an absolute champion. So tell us about the podcast, or anyone, like a website, whatever you want to kind of go for more.
Yeah, so probably the best two places to find me is the podcast, which has just been rebranded as of yesterday. So you guys are getting an exclusive here. It's now called A Lot to Talk About. And ultimately, because that there is so much to talk about, that is life. And after, you know, filming 85 episodes, releasing 82, and being in a situation where I really stopped and looked around at, you know, the community I've created. You know, I'm not a business expert, I'm not a performance expert, but I'm 25 with very unique experiences, and we all face the same challenges in life, right? So we want to talk about the pain points and the challenges that come throughout living an everyday life with a sense of humor. A guest that's hopefully a little bit more of an expert than I am. But basically, we just want to touch on those and bring those to the surface and talk through them. So we're all on that journey together. So as we said, community's an incredible feeling, and it's great when you got people around you that are supportive. Yeah. So that podcast will become a community for people in their everyday life challenges and finding ways to move through them and move through them with a sense of humor. So it's called A Lot to Talk About. And you can find that on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or on YouTube. And then probably the best place to find me is just on Instagram, which, you know, get ready for this surname, get your pens and papers handy. It's just Bradley, so Bradley, the letter J, and then Dryburgh, which is Dryburgh.
I'll drop a link in, boys, for sure.
Yeah, drop a link in, because you know, the Instagram is probably the foundation of what I do. Like, everything is posted on there. It's got the, you know, link tree that links you to all of my podcast platforms, and, you know, I'm on there every day. I love connecting with people. As you can tell, I could chew the ear off anyone. So, you know, like, find me on Instagram. We'll have a good chat and connect. And, you know, I want to help anyone that I can. So sometimes that's a few words of wisdom from the lad that I hassle in the morning at the cafe, or, you know, it might be me posting about something I'm doing with an upcoming marathon or a podcast. But yeah, it's just nice to be able to share my story and the story of others with people.
Yeah, I think we're going to get a lot of people come off this chat and feel, you know, motivated. And then it's, how do you sort of put that into momentum? And I know your job's not to kind of give people a massive pump up, but, you know, I think this chat about purpose and fulfillment is a really good thing.
Yeah.
So
I think I've got a boner.
I want to say to you boys, just a huge congratulations for the community you've created. I think when I see things like this, whether it be in this shape or form, or the shape and form of any other mastermind or any other group or community that's been created, I think, you know, it's a huge credit to you to have for so many people here. And as I'm sure it is for you guys too, people to bounce off and to feel accountable to, and to push you to live the life you truly want to live and ultimately fulfill that potential. You know, bloody amazing. So congratulations to you guys, and thank you so much for giving me a platform to once again share.
It's been our pleasure. All right, guys, we are done. We'll catch you in the next podcast. Wolves and Warriors, thank you so much for tuning in. If this podcast is hitting the mark for you and giving you the confidence to start your own personal journey, I want you to hit me up on Facebook or head over to my Instagram at jstewart_BetterBodyAcademy and DM me with the words Better Body Academy. I want to give you the tools to permanently overhaul your mind and body without dumb diets and unsustainable workout programs. Our mission is to achieve 1 million lives transformed, and you, my friend, could be next. So hit me up on Facebook or head over to my Instagram at jstewart_BetterBodyAcademy and DM me with the words Better Body Academy, and we can have a chat about whether we can help you with your transformation goals.